Starting from this lesson, we'll begin our jQuery study. Just like Font Awesome, if we want to use jQuery, we must put its course file into our project folder first. The best place to get the jQuery source code is the official website of jQuery. At this moment, jQuery is in its third version. We can see we've got two download options here, compressed and uncompressed. jQuery also supports the CDN installation option. The source file is stored in somebody else's server. We just link it to our own file. This can save bandwidth for your server. We can see we've got 4 CDN options here. Let's try the one provided by Google. Google offers CDN services for all 3 jQuery versions. Just copy the script tag and paste it into your project file. Now let's go back to the 2 jQuery source files we've downloaded and open them in Notepad++. We can see the source file is quite long. They are all well indented and commented. As a result, this file is very easy to read. The compressed file, however, is not the case. All indents and comments have been removed. This kind of file is basically unreadable for a human, but machines love this kind of file. We've got the source code. Let's put it into our project root folder. Then we link the source file. jQuery is still JavaScript, therefore linking the jQuery source file is just the same as linking an external JavaScript file. You use the script tag. You're recommended to link the source file inside the head area. But remember, you must make sure you link the source file before your own jQuery code. The installation is now done. Next, it's time to write our jQuery code. The first question: where should we write our jQuery code? Just like writing JavaScript codes, you're recommended to put all your own jQuery code at the very end of your file, right above the ending body tag. If you use independent jQuery files, link them at the end as well. Put your script tag right above the ending body tag. The reason's still the same: one less check to run, and more system resources can be saved. Because jQuery is still JavaScript, it follows the same commenting rules. Single-line comments start with double slashes, and multiple-line comments are wrapped in slash and asterisk. In JavaScript, each page element is represented by an object. This object is called DOM object. That DOM object is like a bridge linking us and the element we want to manipulate. Its methods and properties allow us to manipulate the selected page element. One DOM object only represents one selected page element, but the problem is we often need to operate a series of selected elements simultaneously. In this case, using DOM object can be rather inefficient and inconvenient. For example, we've got several li tags here. Let's say we want to change the color of all list items using JavaScript. What should we do? First, we select all li tags. The best choice here is either query selector all or get elements by tag name. Both the 2 methods will return you the same result, an array object containing all selected elements. But remember, the array object is not the same as DOM object. If you want to manipulate each selected element, you need to retrieve the DOM object from the array using the numeric index. In terms of manipulating selected elements, the array object itself does not have any useful properties or methods. The only helpful property the array object has is the length property. It can tell us how many elements have been selected. After we've received the DOM object, we can manipulate the selected element using its methods and properties. To change CSS settings of the selected page element, we need to call the style property. The style property will give us another object which represents the CSS settings of the selected element. Using its color property, we can change text color. But the problem here is we want to change the color for all list items, not just one of them. This means we need help from loop statement. First, we create a variable index and set its original value to 0. Then we call the length property of the array object to get the total number of list items. Next, we create a while statement. Inside the parenthesis, we set the condition to variable index smaller than list item total. Inside the curly brackets, we retrieve the DOM object using the variable index. Then we do the color changing. After we've done, we add 1 to the value of the variable index. Then we run the program. Now all list items' color have been changed. We can see if we want to operate a series of selected elements simultaneously using the DOM object is rather inconvenient. Just a small task would require a lot of work. jQuery is still JavaScript. Therefore, when it comes to manipulating page elements, it follows the same pattern. We select page element using the jQuery function. The jQuery function has a shortcut, the $. The jQuery function is very flexible with its arguments. We'll learn more about this later. You can put ID, class name, and tag name. You can also mix them together. Just like the query selector all method, the jQuery function will select all matching elements and return an array object representing all those selected elements. But the array object returned by the jQuery function is a very different one from the array object returned by the query selector all method. The array object is a jQuery object. It's not just any normal array object. Unlike the normal array object, the jQuery object offers us methods that allow us to manipulate all selected elements at the same time. We no longer need the while statement. For example, we select all li tags using the jQuery function. Then we call the jQuery object method CSS. Using it, we can change the text color for all li tags in one try. The CSS method accepts 2 arguments. The first one is CSS property name, and the second one is CSS property value. You can use more than one CSS method at the same time. This allows us to reset several CSS settings simultaneously. In the last lesson, we've experienced the advantage of the jQuery object over DOM object. Here are a few things you should pay attention to when developing with jQuery. As long as you use jQuery, you will inevitably need to deal with jQuery object and DOM object simultaneously. It's very important you know clearly which object you're dealing with, so that you won't connect the wrong methods or properties. jQuery object and DOM object may look similar at times, but they are still 2 different objects. Their methods and properties are not interchangeable. The CSS method will not work with the DOM object. Likewise, the style property will not work with the jQuery object either. Usually, jQuery object is more convenient to use. Therefore, when we've got a DOM object, we'd usually convert it into a jQuery object. The conversion is simple. Just put the DOM object into the jQuery function. If you want to convert a jQuery object into a DOM object, you just need to add the numeric index. When we're doing tests on the console table, we might need to convert a jQuery object into a DOM object. But in your actual project development, you'll not be doing such conversion very often. Usually, manipulating a page element using the jQuery object is more convenient than using the DOM object. There are 2 kinds of element selections: absolute selection and relative selection. Absolute selection selects elements based on their traits like ID, class, tag name, attribute, etc. Relative selection means locating one element first. Then from there, we select its siblings, parent, child, etc. The jQuery function is very flexible with its arguments. When selecting elements using the jQuery function, the argument value we assign to the jQuery function are called selectors. jQuery has provided us with a very rich collection of selectors. ID, class, and tag name are the most fundamental selectors. If you want to select all page elements, you use the universal selector, asterisk. ID, class, tag name, and the asterisk are called basic selectors. jQuery also allows us to select elements based on their attributes and developed a new type of selector, attribute selector. All attribute selectors must be placed in square brackets. HTML5 allows you to create your own attributes. All self-collected attributes need to start with data dash. This has made the attribute selector much more powerful than before. You can create your own attribute and use them for element selection. If you only put attribute name inside the square brackets, this means all the elements who have this attribute will be selected. The attribute value will be ignored. However, you can also designate certain attribute values and forbid certain attribute values. The basic selectors draw too wide a range, and the attribute selector is not always convenient to use. To make the selection more accurate, jQuery developed another kind of selector, filter selector. We can use it to filter out elements we don't want. All filter selectors start with a colon. Usually, we put them behind basic selectors to further narrow down the range. For example, we've got a UL list here. First, we select all li tags using the basic selector. Tag name, li. But we don't want all li tags. We need to narrow down the range down a little bit. This is where the time filter selector comes in. Behind the tag name selector, we first put a colon. If you want the first list item, you use the first selector. If you want the last one, you use the last selector. You can also use the EQ selector to get any list item based on their index. The index should be put in the parenthesis. But do remember, the index starts at 0. The EQ selector also selects negative value. -1 means the last element. -2 means the second last element. You can even use the even selector to select all list items whose index is an even number. As for what the odd selector can do, it shouldn't be hard to guess. Once again, whenever you're using the numeric index, always remember that index starts at 0, not 1. Using GT and LT selector, we can select elements whose index is bigger or smaller than a value. The NOT selector can work with other filter selectors. For example, we've selected all li tags, but now we don't want the last one. jQuery likes backup plans, meaning it likes to offer more than one option for the same operation. Many filter selectors can also be replaced by corresponding methods. jQuery offered us a method called filter. You can put the filter selector inside the filter method. The jQuery function only needs to hold the basic selector. The NOT selector can also be replaced with the NOT method. There is an EQ selector and there's an EQ method. However, do remember that the EQ method only accepts index as its value. It does not accept odd and even. Just like the EQ selector, The EQ method also accepts minus value. But remember, the EQ method is a single direction path, meaning the EQ method can only help you locate elements. It cannot retrieve the index for you. If you want to retrieve the index, you should use the index method. In the future, you'll be selecting elements based on complicated conditions. You'll find these selector methods very helpful. Sometimes you'll have retrieved two jQuery objects but want to treat them as one. Take a look at this example. We've got a few p tags and li tags. Let's say we want to change the color of the text wrapped in both p and li tags. What should we do? These p tags do not share the same class or parent. We first select all the p tags and get a jQuery object for them. Then we select all the li tags and get another jQuery object for them. Then we call the CSS method from the two objects. We can get what we want in this way, but can we only use the CSS method once? Well, if we only want to use the CSS method once, we would have to merge the two jQuery objects into one. This requires help from a new method, add. First, we select the p tags using the jQuery function. Then instead of calling the CSS method, we call the add method first. We can then call the CSS method. We can see the result is the same, but we only need to use the CSS method once. We've learned how to select element in the absolute way. Now let's learn how to select elements in a relative way. Relative selection means we select an element first, but this selected element is not what we want. We're interested in its parent, children, and siblings. Therefore, there are three types of relative element selection: select parent, select children, and select siblings. Let's still use the UL list as an example. We selected the second li tag using its ID, but we're not interested in it. We want the UL tag. To reach the UL tag from the second li tag, we need help from the parent method. If you add two parent methods, you'll reach the grandparent of the li tag. In this case, the li tag's grandparent is the body tag. We've got a parent div here. This parent div has got three child divs. Each child div has their own child div as well. If we want to select every div wrapped inside the parent div, including child div and grandchild div, then we need to just locate the parent div first. Then we add the tag name div behind it. But if we only want child div and don't want grandchild div, then we need a larger than sign. The parent method can get you the parent element. Naturally, the children method can get you all the child elements. You can also use the children method together with the filter and not method. The children method itself accepts argument value. For example, you can use the first selector to get the first child element. You can also use the EQ selector to select child elements based on their index. Apart from the EQ selector, you can also use the EQ method. Like we said before, jQuery likes a backup plan. Apart from the children method, jQuery has developed a series of child element filter selectors. Using them, we can directly select child elements. Child element filter selectors also start with a colon. If you want the first li tag, you can use the first child selector. Likewise, if you want the last li tag, you use the last child selector. The child element filter has a rather unique character. You must specify the tag type of the child element. For example, we select the UL tag by its ID. Then we add the first child selector. We can see the child element filter type does not work because we haven't specified the child element type. Between the ID and the first child selector, we need to add the li tag to clearly specify that we want li type tags. Now it works. The first child li tag has been selected. But if we put a p tag before the first li tag, you'll find that the first li tag will not be selected either. This is the peculiar part with the child element selector. The first child element must match the specified tag type. This can be rather annoying sometimes, therefore when the child elements are of different types, you're recommended to use the children method. The children method will ignore the type of child elements. Apart from selecting parents and children, we'll also need to select siblings. jQuery has provided us with the next selector and next all selector. The next selector will give us the immediate next sibling element, and the next all selector will give us all sibling elements behind the selected element. The next selector is represented by a plus sign, and the next all selector by the tilde sign. Just like the child element selectors, you must specify tag type first. The matching element must also match the specified tag type. Therefore, you're recommended to replace the next and next all selectors with the next and next all method. Next and next all methods are for selecting following siblings. If you want previous siblings, you can use the prev and prev all method. If you want all siblings, you use the siblings method. You can limit the type of selected sibling elements using the argument value. Next all, prev and prevall method will exclude the starting elements. If you want to include the starting element, you need to add the addBack method. Apart from the addBack, these methods can also work together with the EQ, filter, and not methods. Starting from this lesson, we'll enter a new stage, operating selected elements. Operating selected elements involves four meanings. First, retrieving information from selected elements. Second, adjusting element information. Third, creating and installing new elements. And fourth, deleting selected elements. We'll start with retrieving and adjusting element information. The information we retrieve from selected elements includes attribute value, CSS settings, wrapped text, and wrapped HTML codes. Adjusting element information means resetting their attribute value, changing their CSS settings, adjusted their wrapped text, and adjusting their wrapped HTML codes. Let's first deal with how to retrieve and adjust element information using jQuery. In JavaScript, the inner text and inner HTML properties are what we use to retrieve and adjust element information. jQuery has offered us something similar, the text method and the HTML method. We've got text here wrapped in the p tag. If we want to retrieve the text wrapped in it, we need the text method. First, we select the p tag, then we call the text method. We keep the parentheses empty. There's no need to set any argument values. We can see the text has been successfully retrieved. If we've selected several p tags, the text method will retrieve all text. If you want to change the text content, you just need to set an argument value to the text method. We can see the text content has been completely replaced. If we want to keep the original text and just want to add some new contents to its back, you should use the append method. If you want to add new contents to the front of the old contents, you should use the prepend method. If you want to retrieve HTML codes, you should use the HTML method. We've got a UL list here. If we select the UL tag and call the HTML method, we can get all the li tags and their contents. If we select all li tags and call the HTML method, you'll find that the HTML method will only retrieve from the first li tags. The rest of the li tags will be ignored. The HTML method can also be used to replace old HTML codes with new ones. This time, the HTML method will work on all selected elements. If you want to keep the old HTML codes and only want to add new codes to the front or end of the old codes, you use the prepend and append method. Using the height and width method, we can get the size information of selected elements. Using the CSS method, we can retrieve all kinds of CSS settings. For single body tags like img and input, they completely rely on their attributes to work. Controlling attributes requires the attr method. If you only want to retrieve the attribute value, you need only set one argument value, the attribute name. If you want to reset an attribute value or create a new attribute, you need to set two argument values. The first one is the attribute name, and the second one is the attribute value. The attr method is quite like the HTML method. When we've selected more than one element, the attr method will only retrieve the first element. The rest will be ignored. But when we're setting and adjusting attribute values, the attr method will work on all selected elements. Take a look at this example. We've got an empty img tag here. We want to set an src attribute, alt attribute, title attribute, and name attribute to it. The attr method is similar to the CSS method. We can call more than one attr method simultaneously. But calling several attr methods at the same time is not a good idea. To solve this problem, the attr method developed a new solution which only needs one attr method. First, inside the parentheses, you put curly brackets. Inside the curly brackets, you set the attributes following this pattern: attribute name, colon, and attribute value. The attribute name does not need quotes. You can set as many attributes as you want, just separate them using a comma. The second argument value of the attr method can also be an anonymous function. This feature has greatly empowered the attr method. So, when will we need the anonymous function as the second argument value? Take a look at this example. We've got a few img tags. Each img tag has got an alt attribute. For now, all alt attributes are set to the same value. Let's say we want to add a title attribute to each img tag, and we want the value of the title attribute to be the same as the alt attribute. First, we select all img tags. Then we call the attr method. We set the first argument value to the new attribute name, title, and the second argument value to the anonymous function. Inside the anonymous function, we select the img tags again and call the attr method again. This time, we use the attr method to retrieve information. Therefore, we only need to set one argument for it, alt. Then, we return the entire thing. The value of the anonymous function is now the value of the alt attribute. Next, let's create the same program using JavaScript. First, we select all img tags using the getElementsByTagName method. This method will select all img tags and returns us an array object. Unlike the jQuery object, this array object does not allow us to directly manipulate each selected element. We need to retrieve each DOM object using the numeric index. But the array object does have one very useful property, the length property. It can tell us how many elements have been selected. If we want to perform the same operation on all selected elements, we will need help from the loop statement. First, we create a variable counter and set its initial value to 0. Then we create a while statement. We set the condition to variable counter smaller than element total. Inside the curly brackets, we use the variable counter as index and retrieve the DOM object from the array object. We assign the alt property to the title property, then we add 1 to variable counter, and that's it. The result is the same. All img tags now have the same alt value. However, what if this value is different? For the JavaScript program, this doesn't matter. But for the jQuery program, this matters a lot. It can only assign the same value to every img tag. Like we said before, the biggest advantage of the jQuery function is that it can automatically perform the same operation on every selected element. But we don't need to run the process ourselves. The downside is, however, that we don't have any control over each repetition. In JavaScript, however, we can control each repetition using the variable counter as index. But in jQuery, the whole repetition process is closed. To solve this problem, jQuery developed a unique solution. Keyword this. The keyword this needs to be placed inside the jQuery function. It represents the corresponding element in each repetition. Its role is similar to the DOM object retrieved by the variable counter. It allows us to access the corresponding element in each repetition. In JavaScript, creating a new element means creating a new tag first, then filling that tag with either contents or attributes or both. In jQuery, we follow the same pattern. Creating a new tag still needs the jQuery function, but when setting argument values, there's a difference. For example, if you want to select a p tag, you just need to put p into the parentheses. But if you want to create a new p tag, you need to put the p tag in brackets. After you've created a new empty p tag, we need to insert text into it. To set a new text, we still use the text method. Alternatively, you can insert the text directly when creating a new p tag. For single body tags like img and input, they rely on their attributes to work. Setting attributes requires the attr method. For example, we create a new empty img tag first. Then we set its attributes using the attr method. You can also do all the attribute settings when creating this new img tag. Sometimes we might need to put HTML codes into the newly created tag, for example, the UL tag. Creating a new element is step 1. Step 2 is to insert the new element to our designated location. jQuery has provided us with several methods for inserting new elements. As for which one to pick, it depends on the situation you're dealing with. For example, we've got a UL list here. If we want to add new li tags into the list, what should we do? First, we need to know where we want to put the new li tag. If we want to put the new li tag at the end of the list, the best option is the append method. First, we select the UL tag and then call the append method. Alternatively, we can use the append to method. The function of the append and append to methods are the same. The only difference is the order. Using the append method, we first select the parent element and then call the append method. The new element will be the argument value of the append method. The append to method follows a reverse procedure. We select the new element first and then call the append to method. The parent element will be the argument value of the append to method. If you want to put the new li tag at the beginning of the list, you should use the prepend or prepend to method. If you want to put the new li tag in the middle of the list, then you cannot select the UL tag anymore. You need to select the li tag. For example, if you want to insert the new li tag as the second list item, you need to select the first li tag. Then you use the after method. Alternatively, you can use the insert after method. The insert after method is similar to the append to method. We select the new element first and then call the insert after method. Apart from the after method, you can also use the before method. The before method will put the new li tag in front of the selected list item. You can also use the insert before method. In this lesson, we'll learn another three methods: wrap, wrap all, and wrap inner. We'll start with the wrap method. The wrap method is designed to wrap selected elements with designated tags. The designated tags are allowed to have classes and IDs. Basically, the main role of the wrap method is to add parent elements to selected elements. And this has opened up a great door of potential. By default, child elements will inherit CSS settings from their parent. Therefore, we can use the wrap method to control the CSS settings of selected elements. So let's try the wrap method. First, we create a new class, parent. Then we create a p tag. We select the p tag and call the wrap method. We wrap the p tag with a div. This div has been assigned with the parent class. We can see the p tag is now wrapped in the div tag, and we can see the text wrapped in the p tag is now red. The wrap method will put the new div tag outside the p tag. Take a look at this example. We've got several li tags, but the ul tag is missing. If we want to wrap all these li tags using one ul tag, the wrap method is not a good choice. It'll wrap each li tag with a ul tag. You should use the wrap all method. Take a look at this situation. We've got a div here. We want to wrap text inside the div with a p tag. This time, we want the p tag to be placed inside the div tag. In this case, you need the wrap inner method. Deleting a selected element requires the remove method. If you don't set argument values for the remove method, it'll remove every selected element. If you want to narrow down the range, you can set a filter for the remove method. Remove is not your only option. We also have two other alternatives: detach and empty. Unlike remove, the detach method will still keep the jQuery object representing the deleted elements. You can still get them back. The empty method works at the parent level. We use it to clear child elements. Starting from this lesson, we'll start to learn event. Because jQuery is still JavaScript, the event object can also work with jQuery codes. The addEventListener method is no longer needed in jQuery. The jQuery function will automatically bind event to all selected elements. All the on properties from JavaScript are replaced by jQuery methods as well. For example, the onClick property is replaced by the click method. The click method needs an anonymous function as its argument. This anonymous function will be performed on all selected elements automatically. Using the keyword this, or the event property, we can control the element being clicked in the anonymous function. Now let's try the click method. We've got two p tags here. Let's say we want the second p tag to disappear when we click the first one. First, we select the first p tag using its ID. Then we call the click method. Inside the anonymous function, we select the second p tag and assign the hide method to it. Click the first p tag. The second one is gone. Now let's take a look at another application scenario. We've got a UL list here. Let's say we want the list item to turn red after we've clicked it. First, we select all the li tags. Then we call the click method. The jQuery function will automatically bind the click event to all li tags. Inside the anonymous function, we call the keyword this. Now we've got the object representing the corresponding li tag in each repetition. Then we call the CSS method to change the text color. Unclicked list items are still in black. Clicked items will turn red. In early jQuery versions, there was a very commonly used method called toggle. But starting from jQuery 1.9, this method was depreciated. But interestingly, the toggle class method has been kept. So what is a toggle? Let's create a button and an img tag. Let's say every time we click the button, we want the image to disappear. If we click the button again, we want the image back. The button here is a toggle. First, we select the button and call the click method. Inside the anonymous function, we select the img tag. Then we need to check the display status of the selected element. We've got two options here. We can retrieve the display property using the CSS method and check its value. Alternatively, we can use a new method called is. This method is used to check the element against the filter and will return either true or false. The argument value we set for the is method is the filter selector, visible. If the img tag is visible, we hide it using the hide method. Otherwise, we display it using the show method. If we want to bind the click event to the selected elements, the click method is not the only option. You can also use the on method or the bind method. But you're highly recommended to stick with the on method and avoid using the bind method. jQuery will depreciate the bind method soon. The on method needs you to set two arguments. The first one is the event name and the second one is usually an anonymous function. You can also put a predefined function name here. The result is completely the same as using the click method. You can also add as many on methods as you need. Just keep your code in a clear format so that future maintenance can be easier. If we can bind events to elements, we can also remove those events. To remove an event, you use the off method. The unbind method can also do the job, but it'll be depreciated soon. In JavaScript, we've got a propagation issue. In jQuery, we still have this issue. We've got two divs here, one parent div and one child div. The parent div has been bonded with an event, and the child div has been bonded with a different event. If we click the child div, you'll find that both the two events have been triggered. The reason is that child div is part of the parent div. Clicking the child div also means clicking the parent div. To solve this problem, we still use the event object and its stop propagation method. There's nothing different here. Starting from this lesson, we'll learn one of the most important front-end tasks, form validation. First, we need to learn a few fundamental concepts. We've got a few input boxes here. The first one has the cursor blinking inside it. The rest do not. Having the cursor means the input box is ready to accept data. This is called having the focus. If we click somewhere else, the input box will no longer have the blinking cursor. This is called losing focus. We need to constantly take actions based on whether an input box has focus or not. jQuery has provided us with two methods, focus and blur. Using the focus method, we can give focus to any selected input tag. Using the blur method, we can revoke the focus status. Focus and blur are also events. They can be used to trigger a series of operations. To retrieve user-submitted values, we need the val method. First, we select the input tag and then call the val method. The val method can also be used to reset the user-submitted data. We've got an input box here. Unlike other input boxes, the title is directly displayed above the input box. When we put the cursor into the input box, title will disappear. The border will turn blue as well. This can help remind the user that this input box is currently in focus status. If we move the cursor out of the input box, the title text will reappear and the border will go back to its original style. If we input a correct email address, we'll receive a notice telling us the address we submit is correct. But if we input an incorrect address, we'll get a warning and the input box's border will turn red. Now let's recreate this program. First, we need to analyze the HTML and CSS codes. The title is wrapped in the span tag and placed behind the input tag. they share the same parent div. The parent div has been set to relative position, and the title span tag has been set to absolute position. This means at the moment the parent div is the reference object of the title span. Using left 10 pixel, we move the title text to the top of the input box. Behind the title span, we've got a message span. At this moment, this message span is empty. This span will be used as the container for displaying messages. The code analysis is done. Next, the jQuery codes. First, we select the input tag and call the focus method. When the input box has the focus, we hide the title text. But we've got a problem here. Many users prefer to click the title text directly. In this case, we need to add a click event to the title text as well. When the user clicks the title text, we hide it. Next, we add the blur event for the input tag. When the input box has lost focus, this means the user has typed data. Then we use the val method to retrieve the user submitted data. If its value is empty, this means the user only clicked the input box and didn't type anything. In this case, we restore the input box to its original status. We restore the border of the input box and display the title text. If the user has submitted data, we check the content of that data. Checking data content requires regular expression. We'll cover this area in the following PHP lesson. For now, you just need to know how to use it. jQuery developed a method called match to help us check data against the regular expression. The regular expression will be used as the argument value of the match method. But remember, the regular expression is not normal text. You wrap them in slashes, not quotes. If the user submitted data matches the regular expression, the match method will return true, otherwise false. If the user submitted data has passed our check, we select the message span and output correct email address. If the data didn't pass the test, we output invalid email address. Then we select the input box again and set its border to red. We can see if we submit a correct email address, we'll get correct email address. If we submit an incorrect email address, we'll get a warning message and the input box will have a red border. Creating an animation effect can be labor-intensive. A simple effect can take you a long time to perfect. One of the reasons that make jQuery great is its animation methods have greatly simplified the process of making animation effects. We've already learned two animation methods, hide and show. Using the two methods, we can hide or show an element. The hide and show method also allows us to control the speed. The speed is measured in milliseconds. To facilitate our operation, you can also use slow, normal, and fast as the argument value. Slow equals to 600 milliseconds. Normal is 400, and fast is 200. Fade in and fade out change the opacity of selected elements. You can also set the duration time. Slide up and slide down change the height of selected elements. You can set the duration time as well. If you want a more complicated animation effect, you should use the animate method. The animate method accepts two argument values. The second one is still the duration time. The first argument value should be written inside curly brackets and follows the following pattern: property name, colon, property value. Property value should be written inside quotes. Let's first create a div. When we click the div, we want to double its size. We can use more than one animation method at a time. Between two neighboring animation methods, you can insert a delay method. The delay method can create a time gap between the two animations. The animate method can also move the selected element, but this requires us to convert the selected element into a positioned element first. The animate method can manipulate the value of the left, right, top, and bottom properties of the selected element. This is why it can make the selected element move. This is also why we need to convert the selected element into positioned element first. Usually, we recommend absolute position. We create a div and set it to absolute position. Then we bind the click event to it. Inside the anonymous function, we select the div again and call the animate method. We set the left value to 300 pixels. This means if we click the div, it'll move 300 pixels rightward. The div will only move once. If we click it again, it won't move. What if we want the div to continue to move after another click? The solution is simple. We add a plus and equal sign before the 300 pixel. This means the animation effect will be accumulated, and you can also switch the plus sign to a minus sign. Starting from this lesson, we'll combine everything we've learnt and create a few projects. The first project is called Modal. Basically, it's a half-transparent cover. In the center, there will usually be a login form or message board. Clicking the rest of the cover will disappear. First, we create a paragraph and use it to control the appearance of the modal. Next, we create a div and use that as the modal. We give it a class, cover. Then we set its CSS. Because the cover will be flying on top of everything else, we set its position to absolute. We also need to give it a z-index value. We then set its location to top 0 and left 0. This will take the cover to the right location. Next, we set its width to 100% and height to 100%. At the end, we set its background color and opacity. We can now see we've got a half-transparent cover. Then we hide the cover. Next, we create another div and use it as the login area. Inside the login div, we first create a set of UL tags. Inside that, we put the form tags. For each input tag, we wrap it with a set of li tags. In total, we need 3 input tags. We then define the CSS settings for the login area div. First, we set its size. The login area div is floated on top of all page elements as well. In fact, it's flying higher than the cover div. Therefore, we set its position to absolute and give it a bigger z-index value. Then we move it to the center of the browser window. The two-step routine operation. First, top 50% and left 50%. This moves the top left corner of the div to the center of the browser window. Next, we use margin top and margin left to make the final adjustment. Then we set a border and background color to make the login area visible. We can see we've got what we want. We now hide the login area div as well. Next, the jQuery codes. First, we create the switch. We select the p tag and call the click method. Inside the anonymous function, we select the cover div and display it using the show method. Next, we select the login area and display it as well. We can switch the show method into fade in for better visual effects. Next, we create the shutdown program. We want the cover and the login area to disappear when we click anywhere but the login area. That solution's simple. We select the cover div and assign the click method to it. Inside the anonymous function, we hide the cover div and the login area. And we can now see we've got what we want. In this lesson, we'll work on another project, creating a carousel. The carousel has two buttons. Clicking the right button, we can switch the current image into the next one. Clicking the left button, we can switch the current image into the previous one. First, let's settle the HTML and CSS codes. First, we need a parent div. The parent div will be the same size as the image. We also need to set the parent div to relative position. Next, we need to display the images. We only need the first one, the rest will be hidden using class hide. Below all the img tags, we create the two icon buttons. As usual, we create icons using Font Awesome. We've already learned how to locate the two icon buttons, but if you still don't know how to do this, please review the previous lessons. Actually, the two buttons are for decorative purposes only. The real switch buttons are actually the left and right half of the image. This can improve the user experience. We create two divs, left click area and right click area. We deal with the left click area first. We set its width to half the image width and height to the same as the image height. Then we set it to absolute position and move it to cover the left half of the image using top 0 and left 0. We create and locate the right-click area using the same method. Now, the HTML and CSS parts are done. The HTML and CSS parts are done. Now let's deal with the jQuery codes. We create the right clickable area first. Clicking the right half of the image will display the next image. For example, if the first image is currently being displayed, clicking the right half of the image will display the second one. If we continue to click the right half of the image, the third, fourth, and fifth will be displayed. When the last image is being displayed, the next image will become the first image, and the circle will restart. First, we select the right-click area and call the click method. Inside the anonymous function, we select all img tags and use the visible sector to locate the one that's currently being displayed. After we've located the visible img tag, we retrieve its index using the index method. We assign the index to a variable current. Then we retrieve the index of the last img tag. Then we check if the visible img tag is the last img tag or not. If it is, we restart the cycle by setting the variable next to 0. If it's not, we add 1 to the index of the current visible img tag and assign the new value to the variable next. Then we use the value of the variable next as index to select img tags. This img tag will be displayed. All of its siblings will be hidden. We can see the right-click area is now working. Next, let's deal with the left-click area. Clicking the left-click area will display the previous image. If the visible image is the first one, we'll display the last one. First, we select the left-click area and call the click method. Inside the anonymous function, we still retrieve the index of the first visible img tag. Then we check if the index is 0 or not. If it is 0, this means this is the first image. In this case, we set the variable previous to the index of the last img tag. If the variable image is not the first one, we set variable previous to variable current minus 1. The value of the variable previous is now set. Next, we use the variable previous as index to select img tags. We display the previous image and hide the rest. The carousel program is now complete.